Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. I haven't done one of these for Transformers in a long time, but today I am bringing you a retrospective for the first wave of the newest Transformers toy line, Legacy. Legacy, so far, in my opinion, has been a bit of a give and take with the quality and just overall satisfaction of what we got. There are some pieces here that I find absolutely just fantastic, borderline perfect, and then some that I find to be very, very lacking. And interestingly, with this first wave, what I expected to like and dislike would sometimes end up being the complete opposite. So it was, very pleasantly surprising sometimes, and then crushingly disappointing others. So with all that said, if you've seen my toy retrospectives before, you know how this goes. I'm going to give a brief overview of the wave, and then I'm going to look at each figure piece by piece in both their vehicle and robot modes. I'll give you my thoughts on the wave as a whole, and then at the end of the video, I'll give you my final thoughts. So if this first wave looks a little small, that's because 3 of the figures included in this wave were Kingdom repacks. And those repacks were a Core Class Hot Rod, a Voyager Class Blaster, and then a Leader Class Galvatron. Now the Galvatron, to be fair, did have some small modifications made to it. They got rid of all the battle damage paint that was on the Kingdom version of the figure. But for me, given the cost of Leader classes, it really just wasn't worth another pickup. So if you were hoping for me to discuss that toy, you're not going to hear much about it here. I may be bringing it up, but I won't be able to show it off to you. The Blaster and the Hot Rod are the exact same figures that were released in Kingdom, just with different boxes. Alright, so what we have here before us is a mixture of Core, Deluxe, Voyager, and Leader classes. All the way on our right, we have our Core class Decepticons, Skywarp, and Iguanus. As far as our Deluxe class, we get the Decepticons Dragstrip and Kickback, and the Autobots Skids and Prime Universe Arcee. Our only new Voyager toy released in this wave is Prime Universe Bulkhead, and then our new leader is G2 Universe Laser Optimus Prime. One of the coolest character designs in all of Transformers. So what I'm going to do now is go size class by size class, looking at each individual figure very quickly in both their alternate and robot modes, giving you some, brief recaps of my thoughts on the figures before I get to the entire wave in their robot modes. Alright, starting with our core class, we're going to look at our Legacy Skywarp toy. Now this toy is mostly just a recolor of the Kingdom core class Starscream, so it's not doing a whole lot new. It's just the Starscream toy in Skywarp's colors. So you can see it makes for a pretty convincing jet. Should be about, roughly F-15 style jet. And it's got Skywarp's signature, mostly black and purple with, the silver accents. Maintains the orange cockpit, just like Starscream. You get some robot kibble underneath, but nothing too egregious. And then you get this really bizarre tuning fork looking thing sticking off the front, which will definitely come to play more in the robot mode. And here's the robot mode, and the robot mode itself, I think, is pretty great. It's a very nice bite-sized representation of the G1 Secret design, and even looks quite a bit like its larger Voyager interpretation. Most of the details line up pretty well. It's even got little nose cone hanging off the back, which is just kind of an unfortunate product of, being able to make the G1 design work without having a very large, complex figure. The one thing that's not very G1 about him is the lack of his shoulder-mounted cannons. Instead, he gets, like I said, that tuning fork thing, which I guess is supposed to be some sort of a ranged weapon. But it's rather silly looking and doesn't look like much of anything dangerous. And this was a sacrifice that was made to accommodate the combining weapon gimmick that is seen throughout the core wave here, at least the first core wave. We haven't gotten a very good look at what's coming after wave 1. But the weapons that came with this figure, Iguanus, and the core Hot Rod that was released in Kingdom and Legacy, can be combined into one very large, very cool looking sword. Unfortunately, the execution on that sword isn't perfect, because when they designed it in their CAD files, they didn't account for a clearance issue with some of these little pegs, and therefore the hilt of the sword has to be crooked, one direction or the other. It doesn't line up the way it's supposed to. So, he sacrifices his classic weapons to get something really just silly and pointless looking, all for a combining gimmick that doesn't even work as intended. So, that is my big issue with this toy. The weapon is just really, really goofy, and I would have been just much happier without the whole thing and just give him his classic weapons. Or even better, just give him both, because, you know, how much is it really going to break the budget to actually just put his cheap little black plastic cannons on his arms? So yeah, mostly a great figure. The toy isn't doing anything new or exciting because it is just mostly a recolor, but it's one of the better core class figures out there. I'd say, you know, upper mid-range. Next up, we get our first new mold core class for Legacy in the form of Iguanus. And the G1 Iguanus character has typically been depicted as a pretender, which, you know, if you don't know, is a just regular transformer inside of an organic-looking shell. Now, they went a very different route with this toy, similar to some of the other pretender characters that have been released since Generations, but not as pretenders, in that they basically combine the character's vehicle mode with a robot mode that resembles the pretender shell in some way. So that's what they did here. That makes me of, you know, two very different minds about this toy. For one, as somebody who, you know, likes to see classic gimmicks remain intact, I am very disappointed by the fact that we don't get a proper pretender Iguanus. You know, I feel like there's a way to make that work, and Hasbro just doesn't have enough faith in the concept to pull the trigger on it. So, you know, they're just kind of always letting me down on that front, whether it's, you know, your Revenge of the Fallen Bludgeon, this thing, your Prime Masters from Power of the Primes. They just really can't ever fully commit to the concept. And I think that's a shame, because I think there's a way to make it work. The other side of, you know, my feelings on this is this figure itself is a fantastic toy. In fact, it is my favorite core class figure so far. So the motorcycle mode is just this very sci-fi looking motorcycle mode with a little bit of, you know, lizard-like detailing on it, which just makes it something very unique, right? It's this interesting blend of animal aesthetic with like futuristic, almost Tron-like aesthetic. And, you know, that's of course a product of the fact that he turns into like basically a lizard man. But I think it's very, very cool. I love the colors on this flat purple color that just really is unlike most of the purples we get, and then this really nice shiny black and red, and the gold, which is a little less shiny but still, you know, kind of metallic. It's just very eye-catching and does embody that kind of crazy late 80s bright colors thing that they were going for back when the Pretenders came out. And also like this kind of pale greenish color for the windshield. So, you know, it's not the most orthodox vehicle mode out there, and if you were judging it based on, you know, realism, you might think, oh, this isn't very good. But remember, the Pretenders weren't ever really trying to look like convincing vehicles. They didn't need to, because they just hid inside their Pretender shells most of the time. So most of their vehicle modes were much more Cybertronian looking in nature, and I think this fits that bill perfectly. Now here's Iguanus' robot mode, and I am absolutely in love with this thing. This, you know, something at this small of a scale that, you know, I wouldn't mind being blown up into a deluxe and thinking the design would still work, is saying a lot. It's very impressive. He's got a pretty complex transformation. I especially love the way his motorcycle wheels and the cockpit can like fold up and tab together to make this really cool looking backpack that kind of resembles a jetpack, and just a really awesome reptilian robot mode. There's awesome paint details, all that. His weapon is admittedly a little strange. It's not as bad as Skywarp's, but it is something that definitely exists to be part of a sword first and an actual individual weapon second. So that may be the worst thing about him, which is again not very bad. But when you just couple that with the sheer awesome look of this character, the great articulation. I mean, he's one of the few core figures that actually has ankle tilt. So I am in love with this thing. Like, by far my favorite core class toy. And it does have me pretty excited for, you know, the Pretenders they're going to do in the future. Now again, I'm still forever disappointed they're not actually Pretenders, but if the other ones they release are nearly as cool as this guy, we're going to have just absolute winners in the core class for this line. Next up, we have our Deluxe class assortment, and since I was already going with the Decepticons, I might as well just keep it up. So we're going to look at Kickback next, and Kickback is one of my favorite Deluxes in this wave. He is a very, very faithful recreation of the original Generation 1 Kickback toy, but done up with, you know, better articulation, just better sculpted detail, all that. So his transformation, very, very similar. And I like it. I think it works out very well. I know some people criticize Generations as, you know, G1 with knees, and to some degree, they're right, you know, depending on the toy that's released. You know, some toys are very, very faithful to the G1 design and are just like straight updates, and then others take, you know, more liberties with the designs. I really don't mind either approach as long as the end result is good. And here I think it's very good. And I was really surprised by how many people, when I did his review, said they didn't like this. They said, oh, I don't like it. You know, I don't like the transformation. It looks silly. It's too much like G1. I'm like, oh, I thought that's what people wanted, but maybe not. I think it's great. If you do like the Titans Return one more power to you. That is a very unique, interesting design. But I love how they were able to take that just base Generation 1 design and improve on it. My biggest gripe with the original Kickback toy was that his insect head here was really just the robot head pointed down, and when you lift it up, you would see the robot face underneath. And they fixed that here by having a panel that flips up and covers it. So now it actually looks something like an insect head and not just a robot staring at the ground. One big deviation they made from the original design was changing the wings to have a more organic texture on them. Just a little bit of, creative license there. I don't mind that too much. But yeah, everything else about him is pretty standard G1 stuff. Now these little blade bits on the wings are extras, and something I didn't realize when I did his review, and it was pointed out to me after the fact, is that these can actually combine. Let's see how they do that. To form an insectoid abdomen that can plug in down here. So you just get in there like that, and you get this. And at first, I wonder like, oh, is that just like some weird Easter egg? I mean, his character never had an extended abdomen like that. But then I realized this is because this toy is being retooled into the Deluxe Insecticon Ransack, which we've now seen through leaks. So that's why this exists like that, so that you can create a more faithful Ransack out of a mold that's really not exactly meant for him. So there's definitely some, forethought in there. They knew what they were doing. Getting this guy retooled into Ransack, it's not ideal because Ransack didn't look, just like Kickback. But given the obscurity of the Deluxe Insecticons and how hard it's been to get any of those in toy form since the originals, it's, a compromise I'm willing to make. And now we can see Kickback's robot mode, and this is easily one of the most faithful G1 updates I've ever seen. Like, there was pretty much no compromise with this at all. The only real difference between him and the old one is that he has the extra blades, which can be mounted here on his forearms, or you can keep on the wings to flesh those out. But they're purely optional, right? If you're like a hardcore G1 purist, you can just cast them aside, right? Give them to some other toy or something. This guy, I think, just nails it. Absolutely nails it. He looks so good. He looks like he just jumped right out of the original show. And, I mean, what more can I say? The tolerances are great. Posability is awesome. And the look is just pure 80s fun. Like, this guy is amazing. I think the only way they could have done him even slightly better is if his chest cockpit actually opened, just as a fun little Easter egg. Because, the original toys were old Diaclone toys. They were the Waruder drones, right? The evil bug creatures that had pilots inside of them. So they had opening cockpits, which is why his chest looks like some sort of a, window or something. Unfortunately, they molded this in a way to where it can open, which, again, that's not a real loss because there's no pilot to go inside. I think it would have been cool if they left that option there, but it's so just obscure and unimportant that I'm not going to hold it against this guy at all. I think he is great. Our next and last Decepticon for this wave is Deluxe Class Dragstrip. Now, Dragstrip, he's interesting because while I think his robot mode is pretty good, I think his vehicle mode is quite bad. And the biggest reason for that is right here, the head. The big old head sitting there in the little driver's area. Now, it's supposed to apparently be a seat, but it doesn't make any, like, you can see the seat back in here, but then you got the top of the head right there. So, like, where's the driver's legs go? It's just very, very poorly executed, I think. And not only does it make this vehicle mode look bad, but it just gives him a big old empty head in robot mode. So, I'm not a fan. Everything else about this looks fine, but my issue with this is, it was a really weird choice to go, a really weird decision. And they just recently revealed the concept art for this toy and the original transformation scheme for it, and it was leagues better. It was so much better. In fact, it transformed very, very differently from this guy. The head would be completely hidden right about up in here. And then the engine was like this separate piece that would fold in for the vehicle mode, or sorry, for the robot mode. This would all like swivel around, and it was really well done and made a robot mode that didn't have any ridiculous extra kibble, because as we'll see, he's got some fake engine parts that show in the robot mode. So why they changed it, I don't know. I had to guess, I would say budget. Maybe that design was too expensive because it was a bit more intricate than this one. It also made for a much better arm mode, like much better one than what this guy's going to get, where it's basically, it's just this, but split in half. Right there, there's a little latch, you take it apart, splits in half across, and basically already complete Menasor. So not a fan of that whole direction anyway. You know me, I prefer like actual combiners where, you know, the robots make up parts of the body and don't just slap onto the body like armor. But I'm not going to gripe on that one too much today. What I do think about this toy individually is that there was a lot compromised in the switchover from the original plan for the design and what we get now. And I think it's just far less satisfying. Now we get to Dragstrip's robot mode, and I think overall the robot mode looks quite good, especially from the front. From the front, it looks fine. It's got some oddness to it, specifically these big like shoulder humps right here. But, you know, most of it comes together pretty nicely. It's when you turn them around that the entire thing starts to fall apart. So you can see, you know, he's got what's supposed to be the vehicle engine right here in his chest, like he should, right, per the design. But the vehicle engine's actually on the backs of his legs, because they had to use fake parts to cheat, whereas with the original design for this toy, they didn't, because the engine was a solid piece, and it would, you know, be on a hinge right here inside the little cockpit area, and it would flip out, you know, extend away from it in vehicle mode and flip inside of it for robot mode. They didn't want to do that. So we ended up with this, and it was wholly unnecessary. And then, of course, the awful hole in the back of the head, which you may not be able to see too well because of shadowing, but it's definitely there. Big old hole right in the back of his head. He looks really bad from the back. And, you know, people say like, oh, wow, who displays their toys from the back? Like, most people wouldn't know. But, I mean, just imagine, right? Imagine you bought, like, some action figure, right? A Marvel Legends toy or something, and the entire back of the toy was just completely unpainted. Like, they only paint the front, and then they just leave the rest. It's just, like, all one-color plastic. Like, if somebody would be like, well, who looks at the back of the toy? No, they would be like, this is horrible. Why would you do this? And for me, it's the same thing. Now, you know, sometimes things can't be avoided. You know, there are certain designs where you just have to end up with like a, you know, big backpack or something. But in his case, all this could have totally been avoided. In fact, the original design had this extra bit of kibble right here, not, you know, sitting on top of his shoulders, but sitting on the tops of his arms, kind of like how it should. He would have, you know, the character always has these kind of long partitions coming up, you know, on the tops of his arms. Now, normally it's formed by the wheels going vertically up, but it really would have made the silhouette much more familiar. And yeah, I mean, the whole transformation was just done differently. About the only thing that was nearly the same was the legs. So I gotta say, I was never super crazy about this toy when I, you know, first got it, first reviewed it, and then knowing what could have been, I am so let down because, like, they had some great ideas. Even if they would still have made this the cartoon version of Menasor with the, you know, slap-on cars, the cars would have been a much more substantial part of the combiner, and the individual designs, at least for this guy, would have been far better than what we got. So, you know, boo hiss. Like, he's a all right maybe toy, but he could have been a great toy, and that's why I have to really just express my disappointment with the finished product. Now moving on to the Autobots, we're going to start with Prime Universe Arcee. So as the name suggests, this is not the Generation 1 character, but the character from Transformers Prime, which has a vastly different design. In fact, the only thing that she and your G1 Universe Arcee have in common is the splash of pink that she has on her robot mode, and that's about it. Like, aesthetically, these two are night and day different. Now, when I first reviewed this toy, I actually think in hindsight, I was a little too harsh on it. I do want to admit that, because the longer I have it, the more I mess with it, the more fond of this design I am. And I think I was docking this thing for what it isn't instead of focusing on what it is. So this is, you know, kind of a reimagining of Prime Arcee, but in the G1 aesthetic. And once you really accept that and just get over the disappointment of like not getting an actual Prime Arcee update, it ends up being a much better figure. So the vehicle mode is quite good looking. I love the shiny blue and the black that covers this thing. The little windshield area looks great with the headlights. And it's just very, very cool looking. The wheels have this nice metallic blue stripe on them and the painted little hubcap area here. Plus this really cool like fan design going around the spokes of the wheels. I mean, it looks great. It's got a functioning kickstand. The blades, can be placed in a few different places, and they look pretty cool there. And even the front tire turns here, which is really neat. Look at that. So you can have her, steer around a little bit. And though I'm not really going to show the transformation, if you do want to, see that, just check out her review. It's a really, really good transformation. Like, pretty ingenious the way the legs work and everything. So I really do end up liking this. I don't think it's quite as good looking as the original Prime Arcee's vehicle mode. It's definitely got quite a bit of like visible robot kibble and stuff, like the hands in the back, and I guess it's supposed to be a seat, if you say so. But for what it is, it's still very good looking. So I do find myself being more fond of this than I used to be. Now we get Arcee's robot mode, and my copy has some pretty unfortunate QC issues that I believed at the time of my review of her were just design flaws. Like, they're just problems with the toy itself. But luckily, people have kind of chimed in and said, hey, mine doesn't have that issue. It actually works quite well. Everything snaps into place. So I do seem to have unfortunately just gotten kind of unlucky with my Arcee. So the issues I had were the knees, where the amount of friction in her knee joint was greater than the amount of friction in her transformation to it. So when I would go to like bend her knees, her legs would tend to just kind of come untabbed instead, which is really unfortunate. So I could tab it all the way in and it still just wants to do this. So I'd be very mindful of how I try to position the legs. And then you can see what she's doing right here. She's flopping backwards, right? So this is all supposed to be able to lock in place. And, you're supposed to be able to push real hard on it, it'll stay. But no matter how hard I push on her, mine won't stay in place. So unfortunately, these issues led to me believing that, the Arcee toy was just a bad toy. But thankfully, that doesn't seem to be the case. A lot of people are saying, nope, mine's nice and stable. She doesn't, come apart. Her back clicks into place just fine. And if that's the case for you, that's awesome. I'm very happy for you, because that does really bring this toy, in my opinion, from like disappointing to actually quite good. And, once I did get used to her aesthetic and just accept the fact that it's really not, Prime Arcee, it's just a G1 take on Prime Arcee, I really started liking the design more. And we could see here, she's kind of got her whole Prime weapon configuration with arm blades, but these can also combine to become a shield. Her back kibble can do some cool stuff where the wheels can split and become kind of like VTOL fans, look like I got a jetpack or something on the back, which is actually meant for her eventual retool we're going to get, which is Road Rocket. But then that whole wheel section can actually come off and become like a little flying drone accessory too. So she's actually packing quite a bit of play here. And, she looks good. She poses quite well, assuming your copy doesn't, flop around like mine does. And, at the end of the day, I've really come to accept her as just a really nice reimagining of the Prime Arcee design, and find myself liking her actually quite a bit. Our next Deluxe Autobot is a Generation 1 character. This is Skids. And this is easily the most G1 based update we've received since the original toy. Not counting Masterpiece, of course. So as a faithful update, he turns into this very, very boxy hatchback style vehicle. He's got these really dark colors, which are, very, very much G1 in nature, because Generation 1 did tend to use some pretty dark, kind of earthy tones for their colors, which is something that doesn't happen very often. Like the last Skids we got was based on the IDW comics and was like this very bright blue. This guy is, kind of keeping it classic. The front of the vehicle looks great. There's lots of paint on there. You can see the headlights, the grille, bumper, all that. The back, isn't painted at all. Like, he's missing so much detail on the back. And this is unfortunately a very, very common thing with car-based Transformers nowadays. They tend to just completely ignore the back of the vehicle, and they'll get little to no actual like painted detailing or plastic color detailing on there. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's okay. Like, it's still a really, really cheap move that they can't be bothered to like paint some taillights on this guy or something. But if you've seen one car transform, you've seen them all, and they almost all have no paint on the back. You can see he comes with quite a bit of weaponry. He comes with his 2 original weapons, as well as this extra new little Energon axe that can combine with them, like you see here. So, they're very modular. They can do different things. He, does go with the whole, just slapping weapons on the top of the car thing that I really, really dislike. I really miss the days of Transformers, trying their best to have integrated weaponry. And this guy's is just hanging out on top, which, I guess you could argue it makes the vehicle mode more battle-ready. But realistically, right, he's trying to be in disguise, and if this is the way his transformation works, where his weapons go on top, because they have to go somewhere, right? When he transforms, they go somewhere. And if that's what he does, well, it's a pretty poor disguise. So, yeah, not super crazy about that. Again, something I'm used to, but I wish they'd make more of an effort to actually conceal these things. You will see with our next figure that sometimes they actually do pull that off, but in Skids' case, they're just like, nah, slap it on top, boys. That's what we're getting. But, for what he is, the vehicle's really cool. He's got this nice, cool blue color to the windows and windshield. He does, unfortunately, have this, weird, red apparatus right here that you can very easily see and kind of kills the illusion. Other than that, it's quite good. It does have the annoying peg through the wheels in the front, but again, just something you got to get used to. That's modern Transformers for you. And the backside actually looks pretty good. You can see his face down under the hood, but aside from that, there's really no robot kibble. These are his feet, but they just look like panels on the underside. So overall, I think it's a pretty good little vehicle mode. And here's Skids' robot mode. And overall, it looks good. Overall, it looks like a very faithful adaptation of G1 Skids. However, there are some issues with this toy that all seem to stem from budget cuts. So the first one, and it's probably the first thing everybody noticed about this toy when he was revealed, especially under, with renders and, bright lighting, the insides of his legs are super hollow. The thighs, the lower legs, everything's very, very, very hollow. And it's purely just a result of them not wanting to spend the money to actually fill those in, because they could have been filled in easily. There's nothing stopping them from being filled in other than just budget. And then the other thing is he's got this panel on the back of his head that makes it part of the car hood. And he's never had this before. It's not part of the character's design from back in the day, and it's just a carryover. The original toy did not have this. So the fact that he's got that big, ugly panel on the back of his head makes this toy feel very, very cheap. So, I don't know, it's hard because the other Deluxes, they seem to decently use, the Deluxe class budget. He feels like he got the short end of the stick there. With all the hollow bits on him, the, really poorly done head, he feels like he was the last design figure here and just kind of got whatever was left of the Deluxe Wave budget. So that is unfortunate. The plus size of this guy, again, like I said, very faithful to the original design. He's got his classic weapons here, which actually go on his forearms, which is, a classic thing. And then he gets the Energon axe, which he can wield as an axe or flip it around and, make it a little blaster. The painted details on him look really great. The fact that his, car rear end isn't painted doesn't look as bad in this mode because they just make up part of his legs. So they actually make the legs look more coherent. And now everything else about this guy is actually quite good. The tolerances are great. The way everything locks into place. He has flaws. He's not a perfect toy and probably the most hit by budget cuts. But he's still good. He's still a very, very nice update to Skids, so I'm good with it. Plus, he's got a lot of recolor potential. Because you can get crosscut out of him, you could get his black recolor that's coming. Was it Burnout, I believe? And then there's the, the red crosscut one? I can't remember its name right now. It's one that just recently got a proper name and got released in Masterpiece. So we'll probably see this mold, quite a few times again, and I'm okay with that. While I'm not super crazy about the empty legs and the stupid panel behind his head, everything else about him is great. Maybe if I had my preference, I would have just nixed the Energon axe and used that budget to fill the legs in or something. Of course, they're really determined to have this Energon weapon gimmick for the line. I don't know why. I thought they said they weren't going to compromise toys with line-wide gimmicks anymore, and yet here we are. I don't mind this thing existing, but if that plastic could have been used to fill the legs in more, at least the, the thigh area or something, I think it would have made for a better toy. I don't think anyone really, really cares about this thing right here. It's just kind of an add-on. Now we're moving on to the Voyager class. So this is our only new Voyager in the wave, Prime Universe Bulkhead. And this was a toy that I did not think I was going to like. When they revealed this, and it looked almost nothing like Transformers Prime Bulkhead. I was like, what is this? Oh, I hate it. Like, ugh, the worst. It's just green inferno with a bulkhead head. And like, I really was not giving this thing a chance. I just thought I was not going to like it at all. And then I got it and, reviewed it for you guys and found myself absolutely loving this toy. It's one of the best toys in this wave. And it starts out with the vehicle mode. The vehicle mode is very, very cool looking. So it's an army-style transport vehicle. It's got your little canopy area here that normally you'd have like troops and supplies stored, in the back. Really well painted. Like even the front area here where he's got the blue windshields, but he's got, black paint for like the frames of the windshield wipers, the mirrors, all that. Looks really good. Not too much obvious robot kibble. You can see his thighs peeking out over here. And then these are his feet, but they also work as like a tailgate that can come down, right? So you can offload things. So that's really cool. And then you can also see his weapons stored in here, his mace ball and his little shoulder cannon thing. And that's what I was referring to, what I alluded to with Skids' little section there, is that this guy does weapon storage amazingly. He actually hides everything away completely. There's no need to have him out there. I mean, you can, if you want to arm him up and, stick that little blaster here or something, you can totally do it. Also, we looked at these during his review, and these are fully, usable Minicon ports. I don't know if they were intended to be Minicon ports, because I don't know why Bulkhead would have Minicon interactivity, right? He wasn't part of the Unicron trilogy. But they are on there, and they do work. And that does give me hope that they're at least thinking about that whole crossplay, and that the eventual Armada Starscream we're getting in Legacy will have Minicon ports. I'd really love it if he had his Minicon, but I have a feeling they're going to skimp on that one, sadly. But yeah, I think the vehicle mode is awesome. He's got like the big storage compartments on the side. He's got the extra wheels that these things tend to have. He just looks really good in this mode. He rolls well. I mean, it's an awesome, awesome looking vehicle. It's nothing like his old vehicle mode, which is more of like an SUV, but it is great for what it is. I mean, even the wheels have 5mm ports on them. Look at that. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff. Now here's the robot mode. And like I said, when this was first revealed, it was very jarring, because aside from the head, it looks nothing like Bulkhead. It looks a lot closer to, Inferno and Grapple. But once I got a hold of this thing and I saw the way it worked, I saw the transformation behind this guy, the way everything came together, how solid he is, how well he poses, I ended up loving this guy. First of all, he's got his awesome mace, which actually, closes around his hand, which is a really cool way of accomplishing that. So he gets his classic Wrecker mace. He's got this shoulder-mounted Gatling gun, which on my copy, connection's actually quite loose. You see it falls out of the little hole very easily. But I'm happy to report that that's not a universal thing. In fact, my son has a copy of this toy, and his fits in just fine. So he lucked out there. Me, my rotten luck prevailed, and I got a big QC issue. It's not the worst thing. As long as I don't, shake him too much or smack it, it stays in there okay. But this thing can also be taken out and used as just a handheld little Gatling gun. His canopy thing in the back, while I like to keep it like this because it kind of resembles his classic back kibble, this can come off and it can be used as a forearm mounted shield, which is neat. Or it can actually attach to the end of this thing via its little port, because this thing's covered in 5mm ports. I can attach there and become more of a hand mounted riot shield. So he's got a lot of play value. And like I said, the posability is quite good on this guy, despite the fact that he's so big and bulky. And yeah, I mean, I have almost never been so wrong about something on my first impression. I really did not like it. I was like that kid where, I wanted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you gave me carrots. And I'm like, no, I hate it. But, finally getting in hand, I find myself absolutely loving this toy. And I believe he is probably my favorite figure in this entire wave. He just does everything right. Just like with Arcee, once I accept that this isn't just a pure update of the Prime design, but the character, pulled into the G1 universe, given, probably a new body of some kind with a more G1 aesthetic, it all makes sense, and I find myself liking him. In fact, this is probably my favorite Bulkhead toy. I think he's great, and he looks, really just ready to put the hurt on some cons, because he's a lot more, just kind of heroic looking and less kind of goofy looking than your more rotund looking Bulkhead. who had, short little stubby legs and big old gorilla arms. This guy looks like an absolute bruiser. And now finally, we get the toy update that I and many others have been waiting decades for. Laser Optimus Prime. Like, fully functioning, trailer and everything. And this thing had me hyped when it was first leaked. I'm like, oh yes, like a modern Laser Prime, finally. He'll look really great next to Earthrise Prime. It was like, kind of your perfect update to the G1 version. I was so ready for this. And then I got it. I was so utterly disappointed. Now, starting with this vehicle mode, I actually think the vehicle mode is pretty good. The cab portion being the best part. Like, it's a really nice recreation of the old one. It does some things very, very different from how it with how it transforms. My only real gripe with the cab portion is the fact that it just completely, well, I won't say completely, mostly reuses the legs from your Earthrise Prime, which was also mostly reusing the legs from Siege Prime, so it's like a double reuse, man. That's a party foul. They do change some things around. The little block sections that are inserted inside the legs are changed to better resemble the G2 version. But then that's really it. Like, you still got the same, like, gas tank thighs and the same feet and all that. It's even got the same, like, pointless little kneecap flaps, which I just realized need to be fixed here. Let me fix that. It's supposed to go like that. Look in there. All right. So we still got all that. So that's probably my big issue with this truck mode. Everything else about the truck, I think it looks really good. I think the front section looks really, really nice. It's a little more matte than I expected it to be, but I actually find myself liking it. The painted flames, the grille, all that looks really good. And the trailer, as a trailer, it actually looks fine. It looks a little more realistic than the old one because it doesn't have stickers of Prime burning down a forest on it and looking kind of ridiculous and also completely destroying his disguise. So I don't mind that detail being missing because they want to go for something that looks a little more, I guess, believable as a robot in disguise. So that's fine. The trailer is too small though. It is way smaller than it should be for this truck. And while it doesn't look that bad in this mode, it creates a huge, huge problem with the robot in base mode. And of course, you'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. I do also want to point out one thing that I do find very disappointing, and I don't know if it was intentional, like a branding thing, or oversight, but he's got the regular G1 Autobot symbols on his side of his truck there. He's supposed to have the G2 symbols. Like, the original toy had them. He even had little firing discs that had big old G2 Autobot faces on them. And for whatever reason, they opted for this one. Like, details, guys. The details matter. They really do. This gives me, like, G2 Combiner Wars Bruticus vibes, where they just kind of went like, whoopsie, I forgot, I'm supposed to use the other ones, I guess. So, I mean, and I know they're not afraid to use the G2 symbols because we have G-Axis coming, and G-Axis has G2 con symbols. So why they didn't do it here, I don't know. I know it's a nitpicky thing. It's not a huge detail. But as a, somebody really hoping for, like, the perfect update, that is a little disappointing. And now we come to the robot and base modes. Now we come to the infinite sadness. That was a Scott Pilgrim reference, by the way. So the robot mode, easily the best part of this. He does some things better than the original G2 toy, and then some things worse. So as far as what he does better, his proportions, I think, are much more realistic and much more cool looking than the old toy. The old toy tended to have very, very short legs for his body, like a long torso and arms. This guy kind of switches it up, where his legs are potentially too long, but still look far more practical than the old one. Plus, he's obviously just got much, much greater articulation overall. He comes with a matrix, like actually has a matrix in his chest that you can open up his little, windows to get a look at there. You can see it's removable and everything. And it's its own piece instead of just being a reuse of the Earthrise one for some reason. The transformation, I think, is better overall. He's also got little missile pods in his shoulders, whereas the original toy didn't really do anything with all that. The weapons are, they're kind of eh. So the sword is just his classic, laser rod sword. The axe is a new piece that is meant to, reference Optimus Prime's traditional axe that he has, but also it's kind of a callback to the blue discs that were shot from the launcher on the original G2 Prime's trailer there. So just a really interesting little thing. Plus these two can be combined to make like a big old giant sword, which I don't think looks the greatest, but it's still kind of cool. And overall, I do find the toy satisfying. There are some things I don't like about the robot mode, however. For one, he's got a very common QC issue where his little stomach section right here, which is like the blue grill and the surrounding gray area, tends to pop off of the rest of this very, very easily. Very similar to how like Siege Starscream's chest panel used to pop off. So when you're transforming him, it is not uncommon for this thing to come off. Now, is it the end of the world? No, it's just more annoying than anything and something that really should have been caught during, QC testing. I also don't like the hands. He's got these very, very stubby little fingers here, which I guess are there to give him the clearance to like hold these weapons that have little notches coming off of them, because it was a completely closed fist. You won't be able to get that sword in there with the way it's designed. But the thing is, the Earthrise Prime, which this guy is a partial retool of, had these really awesome opening and closing hands, right? The 4 fingers were on a hinge that just closed up around the thumb, so you can open them, close them a little bit. This guy feels like a downgrade from that, and it really shouldn't. Like, that should not have broken the bank to just reuse the same hands that Earthrise Prime uses. Like, he kind of set a standard and expectation that, like, hey, if you're going to get these characters that are, Voyager size, but they're coming at a leader price point, or even Deluxe size, and coming at a Voyager price point, a la Studio Series Hot Rod, you start to expect the articulated hands. We got it with that Hot Rod, we got it with Kingdom Rodimus Prime, we got it with Earthrise Optimus. You start to kind of expect that, and then you get these, which not only do they not articulate, but his fingers are laughably small, and they have to be to get his weapons to fit inside. So I think that's a just big hit against this toy. Like, this guy should not feel like a step back from the previous iteration, and yet here we are with Mr. Stubby Fingers there. Right now, there's something I mentioned that I felt he didn't do as well as the original Laser Optimus Prime, and what that is his big old shoulder kibble here, right? These big ornamental things. They're not connected to his arms like they were in the original toy. They're just kind of a shoulder armor that hangs over the arms. And because of that, they do limit the range of motion of his arms. Now, there are flaps here, which can help a little bit. Like, if you lift his arms straight up, you can lift the flaps up to get out of the way. But then when you try to do other things, like, swing the arms, like, way up there or something, like you're swinging a sword back, you can't, because these don't move. Like, they're just there. Whereas, when they're actually part of the whole arm apparatus, these would just rotate back with the shoulders. So that, I think, is quite a bit of a downgrade from the original toy. And, it's just a result of the different transformation. But I wish they would have engineered him in a way to make that actually work, because it does really limit just how dynamic this guy can look. Okay, so, the robot mode, overall, I'm satisfied with it. It's got its ups and its downs, but overall makes for a really nice, update to Laser Optimus Prime. And then the trailer. Looks vaguely, somewhat, kind of, sort of like the old base mode, except it's tiny. I mean, look at this. He towers over his own base mode. Like, this thing is supposed to be like a big old turret that he can, kind of grab and aim and stuff, but he just, look at him. Look at him, it's like down by his pelvis. Like, it's laughably small. Everything about this is laughably small. There's no detail, right? There's no, like, paint on the inside of this. It's all just flat plastic colors. Really, it just feels so cheap. It's so hollow. And, we had a similar issue with the Earthrise Optimus Prime, the G1 based one, where his trailer was really dinky compared to the original. But as lacking as that one was compared to its original 80s incarnation, this one is far worse, because Laser Optimus Prime was known for having just this phenomenal base mode. It was like an outright battle station and all sorts of air-powered rockets and spring-loaded missile launchers, all kinds of crazy stuff. And this feels so very bare bones in comparison. Like, the only thing I find decently cool about this is that this can come off, and you could probably make some sort of, like, crazy, I don't know, bazooka or something out of it if you want to. Oops. But then also, this bit comes off as kind of sort of a reference to the cannon that came with the original toy, and it can actually be wielded like a gun, or attached to these two to form an even more ridiculous giant weapon. But overall, I mean, this feels so cheap. It feels very, very cheaply made. Almost like a knockoff. I hate it. I absolutely hate this guy's trailer. And if this is the limits of what they can do at the leader class, make him a commander. Like, I'm dead. I will happily pay your $85 to $90 for a really good Laser Optimus Prime, because this guy ain't it. Like, if you just care about the robot mode and you do not care about the trailer on the base mode, you'll probably be satisfied. But if you were looking for a total package and something that felt like a true update to the original, you're going to hate this. Like, absolutely hate it, because it's a joke. It's just like, well, we got to give him a trailer and it's got to, like, fold into something, so here you go. There you go. That's the best we can do for $50, so enjoy. We guess. We don't care. We got your money. So, yeah, he is the absolute opposite of Bulkhead, where, Bulkhead, I thought I was going to hate the toy, I ended up loving it. I was so stoked for this guy. I thought this was going to be a dream come true, and then I find myself hating it. And I hate that I hate it. I shouldn't hate it. I don't want to hate it, but it is so utterly disappointing. I wish they could have done this better, and if they couldn't do it at this price, bump them up. Do 2 commander classes this year, because no one, there was the initial rush to get him because it's Laser Prime, and who doesn't want Laser Prime? But then, once that shiny new toy feeling wore off, everyone's just kind of like, oh, this exists, I guess. So yeah, really just crushes me. And now we get to see all of our toys together with their robot modes. You can see I haven't included Optimus's trailer because, for one, it's really big and bulky, and 2, I hate it. So it doesn't even get to be included here because I despise it that much. All right, so I will say that this first wave of Legacy, I don't think it was a home run. I think it introduced a lot of, really cool and interesting ideas, but I think some of the executions ended up falling pretty flat. For one, there was the sheer amount of repacks in this wave. As I mentioned, we had Core Hot Rod, Voyager Blaster, and Leader Galvatron. 3 toys we've already received in Kingdom. Now, to be fair, Hot Rod and Blaster were originally slated to just be Legacy toys, and they got moved forward to help extend Kingdom out a little bit. So you can consider them right and proper Legacy toys, because they were designed for this toy line, which is, a fair point. The Galvatron is being a straight repack of Kingdom, which was, originally intended to be Kingdom. I find to be just really boring and uninspired, and it's not like he was a difficult figure to get. Like, yeah, sure, when he first hit, of course, everybody wanted Galvatron, so they went in for him, and they ended up just warming shelves all over the place. There were so many Galvatrons at my Targets, and now that he's been repacked in Legacy, there are still so many Galvatrons at my Targets and my Walmarts, just clogging shelves. So I think that was a bad call. I think there are other figures that were not as widely available within the War for Seibertron trilogy that would have done better fleshing out that leader spot if they really felt compelled to do a repack to save money. So quickly recapping all this, with our core wave, we have simultaneously the best core class figure, in my opinion, Old Iguanus, and then, even though he's not pictured, the worst in the form of Core Hot Rod, because that thing is just a steaming pile of dookie. I detest that toy. And then, of course, we just get the expected recolor of a pretty decent core class toy. So core class overall, I'm satisfied with, especially since I already went and got Hot Rod, so I don't feel him stinking up the wave here. Now, do I wish they had just kind of skipped the whole combining sword gimmick? Yeah, because these guys should have just had better weapons than what they got. Now, when we get to our deluxe toys, the Decepticons here hold my view of the best and worst of the wave. Now, Dragstrip, I do believe, is the worst. He's not, the worst toy out there, but out of this wave, I just feel he really falls short, and especially knowing how good he was originally supposed to be and then what they ended up giving us, it falls so flat to me. I really don't like him. My favorite is Kickback, who is just an amazing recreation of the G1 toy with no compromises at all. And if anything, he's even an improvement with the little face guard that comes up to cover up his robot face in beast mode. And then our 2 Autobot Deluxes, I think they're both good. I don't think they're as good as Kickback, but they're both good, and I'm pretty happy with them. I especially like Skids for just being a very faithful adaptation. I just hate the fact that they went so cheap on the legs and the head here. And Arcee, she's just something kind of new and interesting, so I like her too. Bulkhead and, by extension Blaster, I think are both phenomenal Voyager class toys. Blaster is exactly what you'd expect him to be. He's a recreation of the original toy. He does have to make some compromises here and there in how he transforms to give him better robot proportions, but overall he's pretty faithful. I don't like the fact that his eject is made out of clear blue plastic instead of just regular blue. I get, they're going for this energon weapon gimmick, but again, that goes back to them not supposed to be compromising figures to fit a line-wide gimmick. I mean, eject doesn't look bad in clear blue, but it's just still kind of a weird touch and does make the toy more fragile for no real good reason. So that's maybe my one gripe with that release. As an aside, I am still waiting for them to reveal some more Autobot tapes to actually put with him. I mean, Soundwave got like a whole army, and I really hope they don't do Blaster dirty and just not release, more new mold tapes out there. And then moving on from Blaster, we get Bulkhead, who is like the exact opposite. Instead of being some faithful recreation, he is a whole different take on the character that ends up being surprisingly just fantastic. I think he's great, and I end up liking him more than Blaster because he's just so interesting, plus his transformation is just so good. Really love him. I think both Voyagers are great, and Bulkhead is especially just the star of the wave there. And then the leader slot. I'm not even going to touch on Galvatron. It's just Kingdom Galvatron without battle damage. Would I have preferred that's what we got in the first place? Yeah. Because even though I'm not opposed to battle damage, there was really no reason to have it on the figure in the first place. And I am admittedly kind of annoyed that there is a version out there that exists that's oh so slightly better without that weird, scuffing paint on there. But I'm not going to pay full leader price for it again. There's no way. It's such a small change that it may as well just be a straight repack to me. So I don't really care. The Galvatron toy is a good toy. It's fine, but I can't be bothered to buy it again. And then we get to our Laser Prime, who just absolutely crushed me with how bad his trailer is. The robot mode, like I said, is overall good. It's fine. Would have made for a really nice Voyager class toy. But then when you bump up the price another $20 to give us that god-awful trailer that is just so unimpressive in every way. Oof. I can't recommend this release at full retail price. Now, if you can find him on clearance for close to Voyager price, totally worth it. Because you'll at least be getting a good Voyager out of it. But man, that trailer is just a slap in the face. That is them really saying, hey guys, we know what you wanted, but we're not gonna do that. So here's an empty thing that folds in 3 and just, there you go, use your imagination, pretend it's good. So, yeah. I really wish I could say that, there was a good leader in this wave, but there's a boring repack and a really bad leader. I hate that. I want to like this, right? People hate when you get negative with reviews, and you tend to get much more negative feedback from that. But I gotta be honest, I want to like this. I want to be happy with it. And I tend to be very forgiving on a lot of things, but there are just some decisions made in this wave that made me just go, ugh. Especially with the leader class. That is just unacceptable to me. Such a letdown. So yeah, like I said, the wave, it's not a home run. It has some awesome figures within it. It has some okay figures, and it has some absolute duds. And that is disappointing, right? You want your first wave of toy line to be really impressive, really just stick the landing. But that doesn't always happen. In fact, Kingdom, I would say for the most part, didn't have the best first wave. It got better with time. And we have seen the full second wave of Legacy, the Deluxes, the Voyagers, Leader, all that. And we've also seen the Commander class for this year, as well as the Titan class. And most of those look better than what we got in the first wave. So I do think the second wave is going to be a better showing overall. I'm especially stoked for that G-Axis, because if they're going to drop the ball on Laser Prime, we could at least get a good G2 Decepticon in there. The Titan, I think, is pretty cool. Not what I would have gone with, but looks good for what he is. Motormaster, for what he is, he's fine. I just hate the cartoon Manosaur approach. I don't like the car armor thing. And then most of the Deluxes look good. The dud in that wave is probably also the Stunticon there, Wild Rider. But the wave does look interesting and has me pretty excited for what they come out with wave 3, 4. maybe 5, who knows? Maybe it'll get extended like Kingdom did. But getting back onto this first wave, it's an interesting introduction. Like I said, tests out some cool new ideas. Gives us some very faithful updates to characters. Gives us some crazy reimaginings of characters. And overall, it's a pretty satisfying wave. If there were anything that I would tell you to just completely skip out on in this wave, it would be our Optimus Prime. And I never thought I'd say that, right? Like, who screws up Optimus Prime? But they really screwed this one up. It kills me how bad it is. And I would have happily paid for a second commander class spot in this year and gotten a fully fleshed out version. And then use that leader spot for something else. Even if you just do another repack. Like, I don't care. I won't buy it. Let people that, didn't collect through War for Seibertron buy the repacks. But people would have been so much happier with that Laser Prime had it actually been like a fully functional update. So aside from that one, I can more or less recommend everything you see here. The Galvatron, if you don't have one already, is a good Galvatron, so I can recommend that one. The Blaster is excellent. And the Hot Rod, by itself, I think is a garbage toy. But if you do want to be able to build the giant sword, which admittedly is pretty cool looking, you're going to want to pick that guy up. So I can't completely not recommend him. I can reluctantly recommend him if you're a completionist and you really want to be able to build that sword. So yeah, big old mixed bag of a wave. There are things I liked about it, things I hated about it, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. Of course, that is just how I felt about the first wave of Legacy, so now I really want to know what you all thought about this. Do you think they knocked it out of the park? Do you think they fell flat on their face? Somewhere in between? Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this retrospective, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me on this retrospective for Transformers Legacy Wave 1. And with all that said, I will see you next time.